On January 3rd and 4th, 1970, a few weeks before Spector arrived in England, Paul, George, and Ringo reconvened in EMI Studios. They are there to add overdubs to Let It Be and For You Blue. By this point, the idea of doing an album with no overdubs, well, that's been scrapped. John isn't there because he's on vacation in Denmark, but by this point, he's already announced to the others that he's quitting the band. This isn't the first time that the three Beatles would record without John. In fact, they had done a lot of side 2 of Abbey Road without John just a few months earlier. While they're in the studio, they will finish one of the songs that appears in the Let It Be film, but was never properly recorded, and that's George's I Me Mine. George got the phrase I Me Mine from the Hindu holy book, the Bhagavad Gita. It contains the verse, "They are forever free who renounce all selfish desires and break away from the ego cage of I Me Mine to be united with the Lord." George said that I Me Mine was about ego. I looked around and everything I could see was relative to my ego. You know, like that's my piece of paper and that's my flannel, or give it to me, or I am. It drove me crackers. I hated everything about my ego. It was a flash of everything false and impermanent which I disliked. That's what came out of it. I Me Mine. It's about the ego, the eternal problem. The musical inspiration for I Me Mine originated on January 7th, 1969, when George was watching a weekly BBC television program called Europa. The episode was about the investiture of the Prince of Wales. Well, that didn't interest George, but the music they were playing, a Strauss waltz, gave George the idea of writing his own waltz. Perhaps the feel of the waltz reminded George about the repetitive nature of I Me Mine, I Me Mine. Harrison debuted the song for the other Beatles on January 8th at Twickenham, but the Beatles never properly recorded the song. So about a year later, on January 3rd, 1970, Paul, George, and Ringo laid down a new backing track. Ringo's drums were recorded on tracks 1 and 2, either in stereo or possibly with the bass drum on one track and the other drums on the other. Paul's bass was recorded through a direct injection box on track 3, and George played his 1968 Gibson J200 on track 4. 16 takes were completed, with take 16 as the best. Next, Ringo's drums from tracks 1 and 2 were combined onto track 8. On track 5, Paul and George overdubbed additional acoustic guitar. George filled in some of the gaps with electric guitar on the very same track. Next, Paul overdubbed Hammond organ on track 6. George's lead vocal was recorded on track 1, and George and Paul's harmonies were recorded for the bridge on track 2. All of those vocals were bounced to track 7. Paul recorded an electric piano part onto track 1, and George recorded an electric guitar onto track 2. George then double-tracked his vocal for the very last line of the song on track 2, and Glyn Johns mixed all of this at Olympic. On April 1st, Phil Spector was now in the producer's chair. He decided to make the song longer by copying the chorus and one of the verses. And he hired an orchestra to record an arrangement written by Richard Hewson. It featured 18 violins, 4 violas, 4 cellos, 3 trumpets, 3 trombones, 2 guitars, and a harp. The orchestra recording was the very last Beatles session, and only Ringo was present.